Next up, we're going to talk about the Mekong River, which is a vitally important transportation route, and it's important geopolitically because it touches so many countries. It's important culturally. It is truly a vital artery throughout mainland Southeast Asia. And we're going to focus on Cambodia, where the Mekong is particularly important. And we have an interesting picture here in terms of cultural landscape. We, of course, have Buddhism here on the cultural landscape, but we also have an interesting form of transportation. These are often called tuk-tuks, though they have different names throughout the region. And they are these little motorized, you can see this is the front of a motorcycle here. And this is how an awful lot of people get around on these little carts. And there are races actually where people will do actual races on the tuk-tuks. So that is another piece of the cultural landscape. Okay. So the Mekong, here it is. Right? It starts way up here in China and then flows south before emptying into the kind of the southern part of the South China Sea. And it touches or goes through every single mainland country. So it connects this region in a way that few other things do, if anything. And remember, we talked about there were a whole bunch of mountains, especially here in Laos and Vietnam. Those mountains make travel in large parts of this region, and they're over here in Thailand and in Myanmar as well. It makes travel throughout the region difficult. We also have a lot of rainforest, which also can be difficult to travel through. And so the main arteries of transportation for thousands of years have been the rivers. And the Mekong is the biggest and the most important of those arteries, of those rivers. In fact, the Mekong is the longest river in the region, and it is vital to the economy because people move goods up and down it. It's also vital because of fishing. And more recently, it's vital because there's been a lot of electricity generated on it. This is also vital for transportation. It's also vital for culture because a whole lot of the culture of this area is focused on the river. There are people who live their entire lives on the river, and a lot of the important historical sites are connected by the rivers. So it is vital to this region for a number of different reasons. And since I've got some family medical things going on this week, you are also going to watch a documentary about the Mekong as well. So there'll be more information about it in that documentary. It's a beautiful river as well. Pollution is a problem in many parts of it, which is part of that documentary. But it also has some incredibly beautiful sites. Remember that limestone that we talked about? This is another example of those limestone features. Here's some more. And so, there are a whole lot of traffic. There's a whole lot of boats that go up and down this river. You can take cruises on the river as a tourist. And then there are, of course, people that live their entire lives, like these people, on the river. They're basically rarely go on land because there's no need for them to. They live on the boats, they fish, they can trade on the boats, right? All of those things can happen by boat. The Mekong is the river. This is Angkor Wat, and we talked about that in the beginning. But it is on the Mekong, and so that's another piece of the importance of culture. And then this is one of those markets that I talked about in Thailand, where a huge amount of trade actually goes on in the boats, right? You can see there's fruit and there's all sorts of things being carried in these boats. And people bring their goods up to the dock, up to the side, the shore, and people can buy there, or sometimes people buy directly from boats. So this is a really important piece of life here. Only the Amazon has greater biodiversity in terms of just the sheer number of plant and animal species that are found in this area. There are more than 1,500 species of fish that are found in the Mekong River, including this one, and they really do get that big. The pollution and the overfishing is threatening this particular species, but there's just a huge number of fish that are native to these waters. That same kind of diversity that we've talked about in rainforests. And some of the species that have been found here, we're still discovering things, and we're still finding fascinating things. A few years ago, National Geographic launched an expedition, and they found a number of new creatures that had never been identified before, including this shockingly pink centipede. Isn't that amazing? And this guy is not only just amazing visually, but it shoots cyanide. That is one of its defenses. It actually shoots cyanide to keep predators away. So just wow. They found a spider with 12-inch legs, which honestly I think is unnecessary, but still, I mean, these are amazing creatures. Right? And they also found a new pit viper that is this just mind blowingly vivid green. So, this is a really important storehouse for biodiversity for our planet. And when we talk about Cambodia, the Mekong is incredibly important to Cambodia. Cambodia has had a hard time over the last several generations. They had a hard time under French colonization, and because Cambodia is the third piece of Indochina, of Indochine, after Laos and Vietnam. And then during the period of the Vietnam War, they had some trouble there. But even worse was a dictator whose name was Pol Pot. He actually started out as a history teacher, of all things, and he had some very, very strange and awful ideas about the way a country should be run. Phnom Penh, right here, that is the capital. He basically threw everybody out of the capital, and lawyers, doctors, teachers, all sorts of people were forced to work on the farms all over the country, and that meant there were no doctors and teachers and lawyers and government officials to actually run things, the people who knew how to do those things, and the country's politics economy was just destroyed. There was also a horrible civil war, and Pol Pot and his regime um, instituted a genocide against their own people. Millions of people were killed in Cambodia in a period of time often called the killing fields because they would just bury the bodies in mass graves. And so this was obviously a very difficult time. The country has been recovering from that, working on development, working on tourism, especially around things like Angkor Wat, which is right here. And this is a growing economy, but a still struggling economy. And the Mekong River is very important to their economy because so much fishing is done on it, and it also is important for tourism. But there's another reason that the Mekong is just particularly remarkable here, and that has to do with Tonle Sap, with that lake that we identified. So let's look at why Tonle Sap is so remarkable. It actually reverses direction. The river actually reverses direction here, and it makes the lake swell per part of the year. So the lake actually grows and contracts over part of the year because the Mekong River actually ends up reversing course for part of the year. So usually the Mekong River from November to May, it flows down this way through Cambodia and then south into Vietnam. So that's what it happens November to May. But from June to October, the direction actually reverses like this with this red line. And there's so much wind onshore and the tides are so high that there's this combination of forces means that instead of flowing to the south, the river actually gets pushed this way and Tonle Sap grows. So the river changes direction, the lake swells, the lake grows. Here is where the water is all year long, and then the light blue is the floodplain, that where when the river reverses, that the lake adds a whole bunch more water. It increases 9 times in size and volume. How's that for a remarkable lake, right? And like I said, it's hugely important to Cambodia because 60% of Cambodia's protein intake comes from fish from this lake. So the flow of the Mekong is incredibly important for the nutrition and the economy of Cambodia. All right, so that is the end of this section, and then we will wrap up with the rest of the countries and a few more bits about the habitat in the next section.